Okay, hi. Today we're going to do some still life photography. Now you might think that's boring, and you could be right. Certainly a few years ago I would have thought still life photography pretty boring, but having lived through now almost exactly a year of lockdown, or various lockdowns with little bits of freedom in between, still life has become something which I've actually done a bit more of, and it actually helps. I have this problem at weddings and photo shoots and model shoots and stuff like that. I'm not a detail kind of guy. I tend to look at the big picture, get the composition right, get the lighting right, and I miss that plastic bag in the corner of the room. The socket that's coming out of the bride's head, silly little things like that. I know that's a weakness of mine, and I miss the details. So still life is all about the details, and so for me it's a good way to practice and to just try and work a little bit more towards just having this mindset of getting the details right. So what I'm going to do today is something I want: absolute minimalist photography. And what I'm looking at doing is a completely white background with no lines, no corners, no edges, just completely white, with a piece of fruit. And I'm going to do actually lots of bits of fruit and vegetables and little plants and things like that while I've got the setup there. But we'll just look at the first one, which is an apple. And I want this to be an absolutely perfect picture of an apple. It doesn't have to be a perfect apple, it does have to be a perfect picture, which might sound easy. You just put an apple there and you take a photo, but that's not quite what we're doing. We're going as far as I possibly can to get an interesting photo of an apple, and that for me means shadow and reflection. And that again might sound easy, but actually it's not. To get the correct sort of shadow so that it's not too sharp but is visible without being too obvious, so that it blends in and just becomes part of the photo. Getting that light right is quite difficult. We'll talk about that when we get out to my set in a moment. Reflection. If you want reflection, you obviously need a shiny surface, or you've got to do a huge amount of work in Photoshop. So I've gone for a shiny surface, which sounds easy. I bought some white sticky plastic, stick-on plastic, stuck it on some foam board, and you won't believe the problems that I had not getting bubbles in it, getting it flat because we don't want wrinkles, getting a nice smooth curve at the back. Sounds easy, but it's probably taken me around about an hour now to actually get this set up. And then the fruit. Do you rest the fruit on the shiny plastic? I didn't want that. I want it floating in midair so that I can see the reflection and the shadow. And I'll even probably at some point, probably after I've done this video, I'll take a bite out of the apple and there'll be juice dripping out of the apple. That kind of thing. Just to make it a bit more interesting than just a boring old apple. I did some shots that I thought were going to be okay, but then realised I needed a little bit more depth to the shot, so I've now got a flash in there as well. So let's go and have a look at the setup. I'll explain what each of the components is doing, how I'm getting the shot, and even if you're not into doing still life photography, you might pick up the odd thing here and there that'll help in the photography that you do. I hope so. Let's go and have a look. Okay, so here's the setup, and this is in the corner of our kitchen. It's my wife's cake making table really, but I've pinched it for the for this setup. So what we have is some foam board as a base, and there's actually some foam board behind here as well, and I've stuck, as you can see quite badly, some sticky shiny plastic onto that. to give a shiny surface. Now it looks dreadful in here, but because when we actually come to take the shot, we're going to be using a narrower depth of field than we get on this video. I think, and I'm pretty sure, we're going to lose all the crinkles and lumps and bumps. We've got the apple suspended on some stiff wire, and it's just a little bit off the shiny plastic. It's probably 1/2 inch off of there. The wire's just stuck in the back of the apple, and I then realised that I needed a flash to actually give the apple some depth and to give it a bit of reflection. I've taken both shots with flash, without, and at least in Lightroom later on I'll have something to play around with and see which one looks best. Onto the camera, my D780, because rather than the D700, because we've got I'm using live view, and using live view on the D780 is much more easy than on the D700, because we've got the touch screen, the focus is much easier, and it's just less of a struggle. We've got obviously the wireless flash trigger, which is setting off the flash. Now on the flash, I don't want the flash giving me any light at all on the white shiny plastic. As you can see, I think you can see in this shot, we do have a nice shadow. We've got a large window, but it's very overcast outside. We've got no direct sunlight, so we've got that nice soft shadow, and we've got a reflection of the apple on the shiny plastic. The flash, to stop it giving any light onto the background, has got a snoot, so it really is just putting some light onto the apple. So the settings on the camera, 30th of a second, f5, ISO 200. If I turn the flash off, it's slightly underexposed, and everything is manual. It looks slightly blue on the back screen there compared to the actual view on the video, and that's because I've got white balance set to manual, and I've got it set to Kelvin 5000, whereas daylight is around about 5500. So this is slightly shifted towards the blue, which I think in Lightroom will make the white, sounds a bit weird, but it will make the white look more white than it would be at daylight setting. Everything else, as I say, is manual, so that I can change fruit, and even if the fruit is a different colour, if we go from an apple to an orange, that could affect the white balance if it was on auto, so even that's on manual. So all we do is I'm using tracking focus, do the focus, do the flash, and there we have the shot. So what we'll do now is I'll take loads of shots, we'll go into Lightroom, and we'll look at Lightroom and see what we can do to make this into a fine art still life. So here we are in Lightroom. I've selected just 3 of the photos that I took. We've got the apple, we've got the tangerine, and we've got some an aloe vera, which I think is actually the best photo of the lot. But we'll come back to the apple. We'll edit all 3. We'll start with the apple, which actually is possibly, I think, going to be the most difficult. Let me just talk first of all about the exposure on the background here. You remember over back in the video when I was actually doing the shooting, that I had matrix metering, and that the light meter on the back of the camera that we were looking at showed it as being exactly 0. Brilliant. 2 things to mention. First of all, the D780, which I'm using, I actually used the tracking spot. So it's auto AF on live view, but I then touch the screen, so that then turns on a tracking spot. It's basically almost single point, or at least a very small area, which, as we're using f5, I felt was plenty good enough. Now the D780,
even if it's using matrix metering, the moment you've got any sort of spot focus, be that a medium area, a small area, a face, an eye, then what it will do is it will bias the exposure towards the focus spot. So it's not the same as spot metering, which actually literally links the metering point to the focus point, but it does, in quotes, bias it towards whatever is actually in focus. I thought I'd just mention that. I don't know that the D750 did that. I don't recall it doing that. I think the D850 does do it. So it means that now, whereas previously on the D750 I used spot metering all the time, on the D780 I now use matrix metering because I know it's going to bias it towards whatever I'm actually focused on, but without some of the problems that occasionally spot metering can give you. I digress. We had the exposure on 0. Now, what does a camera try and do when it's trying to get perfect exposure? Well, it tries to get white to be 18% grey. And that, of course, is pretty much what we've got here. We haven't got a white background at all. We've got an 18% grey background. My mistake, I overlooked that. I didn't even think about it at the time. But we'll deal with that in a second. We've got good exposure on the Apple, very nice exposure. The flash that we had, as you can see, it's not decimated this shadow here. It's not done anything to the reflection. We've got no shadow on this side. Remember, the flash was over here pointing that way, so we've got a nice reflection here. We've got a bit of reflection here that wasn't there. Well, that was half there from the window light, but this is the flash just made it even better. We've got, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself, turn that off. We've got good focus, and we're zoomed in here at 200%. So this is equivalent to printing the picture, what, at least a metre square. And as you can see, this is what it would look like printed a metre square. It's going to look absolutely fabulous. First thing I'm going to do is actually crop it, because I actually like a 4:3 crop. Not all the time, but I certainly think this lends itself to a 4:3 crop. And I'm going to position it so that we've got the shadow pretty well in the middle, and a balanced apple and reflection there. So that's going to do me for the composition. You might not think that's the best composition. I might in fact change it myself later. Normally what I do when I'm editing anything that's, if you like, a little bit in quotes arty, then I'll normally do the edit and come back to it in a day, maybe sometimes 2 or 3 days later, and look at it again, and I might decide, in fact I'm already deciding, that we want just a little bit more space around the top of the apple there. Okay, and just make sure that I'm happy with the edit that I've done. Now, to get this to be white, we simply need to lift the exposure, because that's basically all the camera has done. It's just underexposed to get the white to be 18% grey rather than white. So that, to me, looks pretty right. I think around there. It might not be perfectly white, but it's white enough. If that's it's not very technical, but it's white enough. If we drop the shadows, because this area is obviously darker than the background, that will affect that. I think if we drop the blacks, we'll then get some contrast back on the apple. Maybe drop the highlights a little bit. No, I'll go back up with that. And I think exposure wise now, I'm pretty happy with that. We now need to get rid of this wire, of course. So let's go to, well, let's zoom right in on that part there. This is going to be the most difficult part to actually get rid of. We're going to try and do it with the spot removal tool. If this doesn't work, we're going to Lightroom, but see if we can do it in here with this. You've got two choices, clone and heal, and I'm going to use clone because we've got a very simple background. There's no need to use heal. Heal I tend to use where the background is quite complicated. I tend to use heal for faces and that kind of thing. Clone, here we can just take this area here and put it here, and that should do the job. I've get the feather so that it matches the sort of fuzziness that we've got at the back of the apple there. Something like that. And I'll then run that round what I believe to be the edge of the apple. And then we just go up a little bit. And what does that look like? Well, apart from this bit of a shadow here, I think that's pretty good. So we can now move to get rid of this area. And if I start here, in fact I need to go a bit bigger. We've got some shadow around the edge there, down to about there. That should be completely disappeared. And the final part, I think we can simply do like that, and that should be good enough. I will check that after the video. In fact, let's do it now. Let's just make sure that there's no obvious lines or shadows. That's fine. Okay, so that's that problem solved. Now, is there anything else I want to do with this? I don't really think there is, to be honest. I'm just noticing, and I'm not sure if it's coming out on the video, that up here we do have just a little bit darker kind of along here than it is maybe over here, which is to be expected because we had the window light was over here, and obviously there's going to be a gradient in exposure as we go across. So I would expect this side to be slightly darker than that side. How do we fix that? Well, we can use a graduated filter. And if we do it, if we're fairly subtle with the way we do it, which is not that, sorry, take that off. Right, if we just increase the exposure just a tiny bit, and maybe just lift the highlights a little bit, I think that's, you probably can't see that on the video, but that from where I'm sitting has just lifted this side to be the same as that side. Increase the texture and the clarity just to give us a bit more punch actually on the apple. Just play with the vibrance. Nope. Saturation. No, pretty happy with that. That for me is it for the apple. Right, let's move on. Tangerine. And we're going to do very much the same as we did, and I'm going to speed this up now. Very much the same as we did with the apple. I think about there. Again, lift the exposure to get the background lighter, drop the shadows, give it some black, increase the texture, a little bit of clarity. Oh, that's really popping off the page now. That is brilliant. So again, we just got to get rid of the wire. We'll just put a little bit of additional exposure on that side. That's that one done. And finally, the aloe vera. The aloe vera, you probably can't see it, and again, I'm not going to bother getting rid of it because it's a bit of a slow job, but my wife had some incredibly thin, transparent thread for the sewing machine. It literally was about the same thickness as a human hair, so I'll get rid of that later, but as you can see, it hasn't made a huge difference. I think I've already cropped this. Yes, I did. It's cropped to 4:3. As you can see, I had a bit of the background wasn't perfect there, so we've got rid of that. I like that crop. We'll do what we did. A bit of a increase in exposure there. Bit too much. I really like this picture, I really do. That's fine. We'll put some texture and clarity on. We've done that. Yep, that's fine. Okay, so that's the editing, and these would now go onto my my photo print website for sale, and hopefully this will fairly soon be adorning someone's probably kitchen, something like that. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope that's been helpful. Any comments or queries, please do leave below. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.